Okay, time to move to the shading part, which is basically applying the materials to our objects. We will do this not in the solid view, which we have active right here, but in the look dev mode. So switch to that. You can do it with the Z key as well. So hold Z and go down, release, and all looks really bright. And I want to talk about it, what it actually represents. The Blender 2.8 has this new render engine, which is called Eevee, and the look dev mode uses this engine to show you preview of your work regardless of the render engine you have selected. So you can have look dev mode, and then you can have a render preview where you can see your cycles render. So yeah, and the look dev mode offers a bunch of options. There is a little arrow here you can click. It offers a preview of your scene using HDRI lighting. So if you click here, you can select different light conditions. And you don't need to know what the HDRI environment maps are right now. What you need to know is you can switch here for different lighting conditions to preview your shadows and your scene. And here you have the option to select the scene lights and the scene world. And what it does, it actually switches off the HDRI and just uses the lighting that you have in the scene to show you preview. But since we don't have any lights here, the scene looks really dim and really dark. So let's uncheck that again, and let's go with this default setting for a while to set our materials, and we'll move on from that later. So let's select the ground. Let's click the ground mesh so you can see it selected, and go to the materials tab. And as in the first episode, we will create a new material here by clicking new, and let's rename that to ground, so we are organized and tidy. And let's choose some nice green color here. You can go like this nice green and yellow color, and then modify the lightness here, or the value of the color. So let's go somewhere like here, and let's repeat that for all the solid objects. We don't have them much here, so let's just click the rock and create a new material. Let's name it rock. And I don't want to adjust the color on that, just the value. So let's make it darker. Or maybe we can go a little bit brown color. That could look nice. Okay, and now select the other type of rock. And as you can see, as we did this on the one of the rocks, all of the link duplicates changed the materials too. So let's click the other type that doesn't have a material yet, and don't click new, click the little arrow here and just select rock from the list. And now we have applied material to all the rocks in the scene. Now let's click the road, create a new material, and let's call it the road. And I specifically want to have a separate material for the road, and you will see why later when we are gonna do some texture painting on that. So let's call it the road and make it really dark here. Not all the way black, but like a dark gray or something. And then you can select the lines, create a new material. Let's call them road lines. And let's give it some nice bright yellow color like this. Okay, and now select the tree, and first we're gonna give it dark brown material. So create a new, and let's call it trunk. And let's go for a red shade and really bring down the value like this, and we can desaturate that a little bit. Okay, and now we want to apply a different material to the top side of the tree, and it's really easy to do that. So just go into the edit mode, and it really doesn't matter which one you edit since they're all linked. Press A twice to deselect, and right now we want to select these top faces here. So just drag a selection around them, but first we need to switch to the face select, so press 3 to switch to face select, drag a selection around them, and just check if they're all selected. We missed the 3 here, so let's just hold shift and left click on those. And when we have this cap selected, we can use the expanding the selection the same as I did on the water. So hold Control and press plus several times to really get all of these. And now when we have our selection ready, we can add a new material to the object. And as you can see, there's already a trunk material, but this part here is called material list, and there's no limit on how many materials you can have on a single object. And the first one always applies to the whole object by default, but you can overload that by adding new ones and applying them to certain selection. So let's click this plus icon here to create a new slot in the material list. And here you can select one of the existing, or you can go with the new one. So let's create new, because I want it a little bit different shade of green than the ground. So let's create a new one and let's call it 3. And here just change the color, make it a little bit darker. And don't forget one important thing, you need to assign this new material to selection you have active. So click assign, and you can see all the trees now change the materials. There are 2 of those, there is a trunk material and the tree material. So we can now tab out from the edit mode, so we better can see how the material looks like, and we can play with the color some more. And I think I really like this. And right now you can just select that tree and let's give it the trunk material. Okay, and one last thing, we need to apply some shader to water, and it'll be a little more complicated, but not too much. Let's select the water object and let's create a new material there. Let's call it water. We'll go with the Principled BSDF shader. It's a really powerful shader within Blender, and most of the time you don't need anything else. And these all options apply to this shader. So up until now we just worked with the color here, and let's do that for a while. So let's give it like a nice blue shade, maybe something like this. And right now we want to apply some properties to this material to resemble the water. And first of them is roughness, which is by default set to 0.5 on a Principled shader. And if you go all the way down to 0, that means the object is completely smooth, it has 0 roughness, and it reflects the surroundings and the light completely. And if you go to the other side, all the way to the one, the material will be completely rough with 0 reflections. So let's go down with the roughness. And you can already see how the reflection started to work with that HDRI. But I don't want to go all the way to the 0. I don't want the 100% reflective material. So yeah, let's give it something like 0.15 to keep some of the reflections. And when you scroll down, there is a property called transmission, and that basically determines the translucency of the material, how much of the light actually goes through the surface into the material, and how clearly you can see through that material. And it's used for materials like water, glass, or something like that. So if you go all the way up, and you won't see it here very well because the Eevee is not set up right now to show you translucent materials, but don't worry about that, you will see it in cycles. And let's set this to 0.9, because again I want to achieve certain stylized look and I don't want the full transmissive material. And what you need to know right now is, if you remember these settings, you will always be able to create this kind of material in your scenes that I'm doing right here. And let's change the IOR. This is a really technical value. It's basically the physics constant, and it determines how refractive the material is and how the light behaves within the volume of the object. And it's a short for index of refraction. And you can see the effects, for example, on glasses, where you can see that magnifying effect or magnifying glass or something like that. And if you look through the water, you most certainly noticed sometimes that the depth of the water doesn't appear so deep when you look from the outside, and that's because of the refraction. And the IOR of the water is 1.333, so let's put in that and don't worry about that anymore. And basically this is the setup for the water material.